video, I will be counting down the top 10 albums of June. This list will be a worst to best list and will be based on the albums that I had the chance to listen to this month. This was a month with some really good albums and some not so good albums, and they were, from some well-known bands. But first I will start with the albums that did not make my list. So the first one that did not make the list is Cambria of Axis 2, Window of the Waking Mind. This one had a lot of songs that were shorter than usual and more of a modern pop production and sound. There were some highlights on the album, such as the last three songs, Ladders of Supremacy, Rise, Nay and Nasha, Cut the Cord, and the title track. Those were the longer, proggier songs. The band was known for that, but I do have a full review of this on the Chill Dude on the Couch channel, so you can go check that out on his channel. So next is the one that didn't make the list was Emotionless White, scoring The End of the World. This one's just not very good. I just found it too close to Marilyn Manson or Ice Nine Kills. There wasn't anything really original on this album, and that's really all I have to say about this album. It wasn't really that great. And the last one of my, I guess kind of honorable mentions was Genius by Wolfsbane. This was the first album in 10 years, and it kind of seemed like it was kind of like a rushed album. I'm a fan of Blaze Bayley, and I like his two Iron Maiden albums. I like his solo albums a lot. That's probably like the best of his stuff. But this album with Wolfsbane was kind of like a pop punk album. I know a lot of people tell me Wolfsbane is not really a band to be taken seriously, but their earlier albums from the late 80s, early 90s were much better. And the one song I did like in this album was called Zombies. I thought that was a decent song, but otherwise it just wasn't a great album. Now for my top 10. Now I may be missing some of your favorites, but that's only because I didn't really have a chance to give them a proper listen. So let me get into the top 10. And number 10 is Windrows with Warfront. They are an Italian power metal band. They write songs about Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. They focus on battles of dwarves. This is melodic power metal. The songs are very epic and heroic. My favorite song on the album was Tomorrow Has Come, and that was the last song, the album closer, and it was a ballad. I thought this was the most memorable song on the album, and I think it's a very consistent album, but at the same time, I can't really pick out one song I thought was a great song, but it was good enough to make this list. At number 9 is Gwar with The New Dark Ages. So this is a band that dresses up in elaborate costumes, and many say that this is a band, they're kind of like a gimmick, but there are some pretty good songs on this album. The musicianship is really good. This is a band that has been around for a long time. They were like a thrash band at first, but this album is more like traditional heavy metal, a lot of doom metal. The song titles are kind of juvenile. There's titles like Motherfucking Liar and Completely Fucked. There's a 3-part suite at the end of the album, which I thought was kind of overlong, and I think that's for that reason this album is kind of a little lower than it kind of should have been. But there are some good songs here, like Blood Libel. It has some slow and doomy riffs. Unto the Breach has these Black Sabbath style guitar riffs, and Venom of the Platypus, kind of more like a modern rock and industrial metal sound. Not a bad album, but coming in at number 9. And number 8 is Ailstorm with Seventh Rum of a Seventh Rum. They play on that classic Iron Maiden title with this. They're just a band that's very juvenile. They're kind of crazy. They do pirate metal. They dress up in the costumes, but they actually do it very well. They mix it with power metal, folk metal, and some ska music. Songs are cheesy, they're campy, they're dumb, but kind of catchy and entertaining. I think if this band was around when I was 18 or 19 years old, they would be one of my favorites. But as an older adult, I still kind of chuckle at some of the lyrics. A few memorable songs such as Cannonball with the very explicit lyrics, and Party, which is kind of very dumb. It's very fun, but very catchy. So number 7 is Civil War with Invaders. So this band is composed of ex-members of Sabaton. There are some similarities with this band and Sabaton. The band writes about war, but mostly stories from American history. They are a power metal band, but they have a very distinct sound, and it is different than Sabaton. Songs are very memorable, such as Oblivion, and that song has been stuck in my head the past few weeks. There are some heavy songs like Invaders, and that one's kind of like a faster pace, has some great heavy guitar riffing. The vocals are good, a little more reminiscent of Metal Church than Sabaton, but I thought it was a decent album, so that's why I have it at number 7. At number 6, I have Kreator with Hate Uber Alles. This is a solid release from the classic thrash metal band. I know a lot of fans say they didn't like it because there were some songs there were like not old school thrash, but it was experimental and I enjoyed that. This album has a sound that is more similar to some of the more recent albums like Hordes of Chaos, for example. There's some aggressive thrash here with a title track. There's Killer of Jesus, Crush the Tyrants. Those are more like the old school, like, type of songs, but they do some other stuff with a song like Become Immortal. That was a song up there like reminiscing about the past, and it's more like traditional heavy metal, maybe like with like an Iron Maiden influence as well. There's also Midnight Sun with a pop singer called Sophia Portinet, and it sounds like a strange combination, but they didn't make it work, so it is a very good album. At number 5 is White Ward with False Light. This was an album that got a lot of hype in the metal community. At first I didn't like it that much, but as you can see, it's at number 5, so it definitely grew on me. It's not an easy listening album. It's black metal with jazz fusion and some 80s style gothic rock and post-punk. It's a very strange combination of musical genres, but they make it work. There's a saxophone playing throughout the album and has some aggressive black metal rhythms. It's an album that needs about 3 or 4 listens before you can really like understand what's going on, but it did grow on me, so it is at number 5. And number 4 is Temple of Void with Summoning the Slayer. So this is the first like underground and up and coming band on this list. They are a death doom band, and this was a solid album. It was very consistent throughout. Even the last song, Dissolution, it was very different, kind of like a modern day like Planet Caravan. The rest of the songs are more like within like the death metal and doom metal genres. So for example, Behind the Eye was more like a death metal song with some chunky riffs, whereas Death Touch was like slower and more atmospheric. And this was a solid album, and that's why it is at number 4. At number 3 is Druids with Shadow Work, and this is the Dark Horse album on the list. They are a stoner doom band. It's a subgenre I usually don't listen to very often, but this one was very good. They have a song called The Aether that has this tribal drum beat, and the sound reminded me a little of that song like Voodoo by Godsmack. They have a song called Ides Cone. This is an 8-minute song. And they mix in like a lot of different like genres. It sounds a little like Alice in Chains, a little bit of Mastodon, some grunge influence, some feedback-driven riffs. Like those riffs remind me of like classic Soundgarden, and they mix all these influences and they do it very well. So this is an underground band and not very well known, but I have them at number 3 because the album was just very good. At number 2, I have Jorn with Over the Horizon Radar. He is a singer I've known about for a long time. Mostly he does cover songs, and he is one of those few singers. He has a very powerful voice, and he can like pull off a Ronnie James Dio song very well. I like this album. It's more classic traditional metal as opposed to like his usual power metal albums. The whole album is just very good. There are no weak songs on the album. 2 singles, Over the Horizon Radar and One Man War, are very catchy. They've been playing in my head like for these last like 2 weeks. There's a lot of like Deep Purple influence on here, and there are a lot of times he sounds like David Coverdale, like from the Burn album. So just a solid album. If you don't know Jorn, check it out. Check out this album. It's just like really good. And number 1, should be no surprise, it's Porcupine Tree with Closure Continuation. I just reviewed this one yesterday, so I won't like talk too much about it. It's just a near perfect album. So if you're a fan of this band or progressive music in general, they get some classic influences. Sometimes they sound like Yes, sometimes they sound like Radiohead, sometimes they sound a little heavier like Opeth, and they just do a very good job. This album mixes like the heavy and the light very well, but they balance it perfectly, so you never really like feel like one side of it is like too heavy or too light or too slow or boring. So I recommend just watch my review. It's a great album, and that's all. So up next, I have some anniversary reviews coming up. I will be doing Suicidal Tendencies, The Art of Rebellion from 1992, the Singles soundtrack from 1992 that has like a lot of grunge in it, and Kiss's Love Gun from 1977. Please remember, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.